Every other mammal on Earth has a cycle. Every other mammal stops bleeding after a few days, and then the bleeding stops. But your body does something almost no other animal does. It bleeds for 5 to 7 days every single month for 40 years of your life. Not because you're injured, but because your body decided that the only way to build a human being was to line your uterus with blood and then discard it, over and over again, if the egg goes unfertilized. And that single biological fact, that one difference between you and every other animal, shaped the entire structure of human civilization. It created rituals. It created religions. It created fears that still echo in your body today. The real reason has nothing to do with what you've been taught, and the consequences changed everything about how humans organize themselves. Most animals don't menstruate. This is the first thing you need to understand. They have estrus cycles, a window of fertility where they bleed slightly and then the bleeding stops. The cycle ends. Dogs have it. Cats have it. Primates have it. But humans? Humans kept bleeding. Humans bled for no biological reason that any scientist fully understood until very recently. And the question is, why would evolution do this? Why would a body waste blood, the most precious resource an organism has, every single month for decades? The answer is older and stranger than you think. Go back before there was writing. Go back before there were cities. Go back to when your ancestors were still figuring out what their own bodies did. A human girl reached puberty for the first time and started bleeding. Not a little bit. Significantly. Her mother didn't know what was happening. Nobody knew what was happening. For thousands of years, humans had no framework for this. They had no medical explanation. They only had the fact of blood, pouring out of the body every month, unstoppable, without explanation. What do you do with a phenomenon you can't explain? You make it sacred. You make it dangerous. You make it a law. The anthropologist Margie Prophet spent years trying to understand why humans menstruate at all. In 1993, she proposed something radical. Menstruation wasn't a waste product. It was a defense system. She argued that the monthly shedding of the uterine lining was the body's way of removing pathogens. During pregnancy, the uterus becomes an ideal environment for bacteria and parasites. The embryo is vulnerable. And the body's solution, Prophet proposed, was to clear the slate every month, to bleed out the compromised tissue and start fresh. It's not elegant, it's not efficient, but it works. And it might be the reason humans have been able to survive parasitic infections that would kill other species. But here's where it gets darker. Because once humans started menstruating, once this regular, unexplainable bleeding started happening, humans had to make sense of it. And the sense they made changed everything about how women were treated in almost every civilization that ever existed. The historian Janice Delaney documented something stunning in her research. In almost every ancient culture, Egyptian, Hebrew, Greek, Hindu, Japanese, Islamic, menstruation became forbidden. Women were isolated. They were considered unclean. In some cultures, they were separated from the community for the duration of their cycle. In others, they were not allowed to touch food, not allowed to enter temples, not allowed to be near men. The Levitical Code forbade it. The Quran addressed it. The Laws of Manu in Hinduism detailed the exact restrictions. And this wasn't random. This was deliberate law, codified, religious, absolute. But why? Why would almost every civilization independently decide that menstruation was so dangerous that it required isolation? The neuroscientist Sophia John Smith has argued that it wasn't about the blood itself. It was about control. Menstruation was the one thing about the female body that couldn't be controlled or hidden. It happened on a schedule. It was visible. It marked time in a way that male bodies didn't. And in societies that were trying to control female sexuality, female power, female autonomy, menstruation became the perfect excuse. It became the law. It became the reason women had to be separated, contained, controlled. It was biology weaponized into hierarchy. Think about what that meant. If you menstruated, you were unclean. If you menstruated, you couldn't enter sacred spaces. If you menstruated, you couldn't prepare food. If you menstruated, you couldn't be trusted around men. The blood became a marker of danger. The cycle became a marker of shame. And shame, once it's embedded in biology, becomes invisible. It stops feeling like oppression. It starts feeling like nature, and the body remembers. Even now, thousands of years later, people who menstruate carry that shame in their nervous system. Studies by the researcher Ingrid Johnston-Robledo show that girls who grow up hearing menstruation described as something to hide, something to be ashamed of, something dirty, develop anxiety around their own cycles that persists into adulthood. The body learns what the culture teaches it. The blood becomes a source of embarrassment rather than information. The cycle becomes something to minimize, to hide, to apologize for. But there's something else embedded in that blood, something the taboos were actually trying to prevent. Menstruation is a biological record. Your cycle is a readout of your hormonal state, your nutritional status, your stress levels, your health. It's information. And for most of human history, women were discouraged from paying attention to that information. They were discouraged from understanding their own bodies. The menstrual cycle was treated as a secret, a source of shame, something that happened to you, rather than something you could understand or work with. The reproductive biologist Katsi Cook documented something remarkable. In indigenous cultures that didn't treat menstruation as unclean, that instead treated it as a sign of power or a time of heightened intuition or a natural part of the body's communication system, women had different relationships to their own cycles. They paid attention. They noticed patterns. They used menstruation as information rather than enduring it as an affliction. The blood wasn't shame. It was knowledge. Here's what menstruation actually does. Once a month, your body builds a thick, nutrient-rich lining in your uterus. For about 2 weeks, an egg develops and travels down your fallopian tube. If that egg meets sperm, it implants in that lining and begins to grow. If it doesn't, the body has a choice. Keep the lining, keep waiting, waste resources, or clear it out, start fresh, prepare for the next cycle. The body chooses clarity. It sheds the lining. It bleeds. That bleeding is not a flaw, it's the body being efficient. It's the body refusing to waste resources on infrastructure that isn't being used. It's the body saying, every single month, I'm ready to create life. I have prepared. And when that preparation isn't needed, I let it go. But somewhere along the way, humans decided that this biological efficiency was dangerous, that it made women weak, that it made them unreliable, that it needed to be hidden, that it should be shame. The evolutionary biologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy has spent decades studying what she calls the female coalition. In many primate societies, females are the power structure. They form alliances. They control resources. They make decisions about who mates, who lives in the group, how resources are distributed. But in human societies, in most human societies, that power got flipped. Women lost the coalition structure. And one of the ways that happened was through the control of menstruation. Once menstruation became forbidden, shameful, something that isolated you, it became harder to maintain female coalitions. It became harder for women to organize. It became easier for male-dominated hierarchies to take control. The blood didn't change. The taboo did. And the taboo was not an accident. It was a tool. Right now, in some parts of the world, that tool is still being used. In Nepal, women are still confined to huts during menstruation. In the United States, the language around menstruation in advertising, in medicine, in education, still carries echoes of shame. The period is still called the curse. Women are still told that menstruation makes them unstable, unreliable, weak, but the blood tells a different story. Your menstrual cycle is the body's most honest communication. It tells you when you're stressed. It tells you when you're not getting enough nutrients. It tells you when your sleep is disrupted. It's not a curse, it's a signal. And for thousands of years, humans did everything they could to make women ignore that signal, to turn it into shame. But there's a shift happening. And it's happening because people are finally listening to what the blood has been trying to say. The neuroscientist Georgie Bruinvels published a study in 2019 showing that athletes who understood their menstrual cycles, who paid attention to their hormonal fluctuations, performed better. They trained smarter, They recovered faster. They got injured less. Because they were listening to their bodies instead of fighting against them. They were using the information instead of hiding from it, and their performance improved.